groin vault, which you see here in this configuration. And then, just as you can create a barrel vault from the horizontal extension of the arches, you can extend the groin vaults, put them side by side, as you see here, and then opening up the spaces as lunettes here to allow light to come in. You increase the potential, the structural potential of stone to allow greater openings, to allow more light to come in, to allow a greater variety in the definition of space. You could also, if you wish, take a corridor or a tunnel built of groin zones and curve it and wrap it around a theater or an amphitheater. So the arch, and by extension the barrel vault, and by extension the groin vault, had a great potential, which was used in great popularity by the Romans when they did not use concrete, and when they used the stone material in the provinces. In the Colosseum, which we shall shortly see, we see both the structural and decorative use. In the Pondugar, we saw the engineering employed by the arch system. In the ceremonial or triumphal arches of Titus and Constantine, we saw the monumentalization of the arch and also its visual decorative impact. And in this four-story facade of the Colosseum, what we have is the structural use. The barrel vaults are being used on 3 stories. There are engaged pilasters on the 4th story, and then there are applied classical mortars, the Doric or Tuscan, and then the Ionian, and then the Corinthian on the top, each utilizing a frame to define further the outside the surface of the vaults. If you try to imagine, just for the sake of experiment, the facade, the 3-story facade, without the application of these engaged orders, you would have a drum of a building, like a huge barrel wherein, and you would have these perforations into the wall, which would make it not, any more monumental, but it would not create the human contact with the building to scale it down so that the eye can perceive each one of these openings much better. So the articulation of the facades, whether it be the single arches, like the Arch of Titus or the Arch of Constantine, or whether it be the outside of the building, as in the case of amphitheaters or some theaters even, shows that the exterior impact was still quite important in the stone architecture of the Romans. This is significant to understand because in slightly later architecture, what we see once the interior space experiments reach a peak, we see that the Romans become more interested in creating outside facades turned inwards. And all the articulation, which we see here on the surface of the exterior surface of the Colosseum, becomes transmitted to the interior, and the exterior is left plain. So it's almost as if you unwrap the facade of the Colosseum and then drop it into the inside of the pantheon or buildings of that sort. Talking of the Colosseum, we have to note it as one of the last and most monumental buildings in stone that the Romans erected. It is still utilizing the traditional system, as we said. It is utilizing the archer system, as you see. There are more than 80 arches all around. It is raised in 3 stories, and each one of the stories, as we already mentioned, is further articulated with applied non-freestanding, decorative, non-structural, classical orders. The Colosseum is a great propagandistic building, began under the Emperor Vespasian. You don't need to remember the name of the emperor. It was a circular oval building, more oval than circular, and its primary purpose was to provide an arena for wild beast shows, shows where animals, wild animals like lions, elephants, hippopotami, rhinoceros, hyenas, tigers, I mean all the animals that we see in the savanna today in Africa could be brought to Rome, and then bloody spectacles would take place with these animal fights. In addition to animal fights, there were also shows of the gladiators, professional fighters, many of whom were slaves. And if you fought well, then maybe you could gain your freedom, or you would participate in as many shows as your life permitted. If you were killed, then obviously your place would be taken up by somebody else. So when we consider the purpose of the Colosseum, we see that it is a great extravaganza of propaganda, showing the power of the Roman state. It is in the center of Rome, a huge amphitheater, and it provided state spectacles of these gladiatorial shows with wild beasts, where ranges, where population, where the numbers of spectators range from 45 to 50,000 people at the same time. So you would have these Romans filling in the Colosseum, 45 or 50,000 of them, roaring, all cheering on the gladiators and the beast hunts. So it was a bit like a psychological discharging. I mean, today when you see what happens in the 20th and 21st century in the football stadia, where the spectators can sometimes lose themselves and grow wild, attacking the players, the opponent teams, or sort of attacking the supporters of the opponent team. And there are some accidents which result in deaths even. We have seen that in the papers more often than not. And in a similar manner, if there were problems at home, economic problems, if the water was not running in Rome, if the sewer system was not functioning properly, if there was any other kind of problem, then these problems were all left aside for 2 or 3 days, or for the hours in which the spectacles took place. So all these people would be packed into the Colosseum in a psychological extravaganza. It was all like a psychological therapy in a way. They shouted, they cheered, they exchanged curses, they swore, everything. They discharged themselves. And this had to be done in a great, clever architectural scenario. So the architects who created the Colosseum had a very difficult scenario at hand. For one thing, they had to deal with a huge number of people. If you have a scenario for 45 to 50,000 people who have to enter and exit without creating, chaos, you have to have a careful design. And in fact, this was such an effective design that when the Harvard Stadium was built, many centuries later, it was modeled on the Colosseum. The architect Makin took the Colosseum as a model to get him the fans of sports. So with the Colosseum, you made entrances, 80 entrances in all, for the people to enter, and then for them to be exited properly. And then you had to have them seated in a hierarchical manner. The emperor had to be visible because he participated in the shows, but the visuality also required a protection of the emperor. I mean, you couldn't have him in the middle of the mob. So the architectural circulation design here created strata so that the different strata of the society would enter appropriately. They would be seated appropriately in their designated social place within the amphitheater. And they would also not mix, but they would be all together as a unified crowd of people watching a Roman game made possible by the power and resources of the Roman Empire. So you could look at the Colosseum as a triumphal monument in this regard, because all these animals would be imported from the conquered states in North Africa, and they would be transported to the capital for the pleasure of the Roman people. And at times when the shows were not taking place, you would fill the perforations within the wall with the statuary. So no matter what the time of the year, whether there were shows being held or not, in the center of Rome, the Colosseum emerged as a monumental architectural edifice and spectacle to impress a memory on the senses of visitors and citizens alike. Since it was such an important monument, it was also a subject for coins. We have engravings of the Colosseum on coins even, which points to what an important monument it was. The stratification was paralleled with the structural requirements. The topmost part of the Colosseum, as you see, did not have the thickness that you see in the lower stories, because it was a graduated arrangement. Instead, there are pilasters which are flatter than these columns, and then at the level where this topmost part was, were not stone stairs, but wooden steps on which the spectators could stand. And who were these people? The lower echelons in the society. So they also had the privilege of watching the games. They could also avail themselves of this special Roman extravaganza, but they had standing on. They would be standing on the steps. The could last very, very long. And because of this, the sun in Rome, if you have ever been to Rome in the summer, can be quite scorching. I mean, you need to protect yourself. And if it rains, again, you need protection. So you see there's masts here at the topmost level. They were for having a enormous awning, a strong, fabric which could be unfurled in parts above the opening, so that the spectators could be, protected from the sun. They would have shade, and they would be protected from rain if it were necessary. This is such a complex system that you needed manpower to operate it, because there were huge pulleys, makara, above these columns, and then they were connected to machinery which was all around. And the Roman Navy, members of the Roman Navy, would come and operate the pulley system, and with the ropes the awning could be opened up, or it could be released so that it would provide a shade. So everything was thought about for the Colosseum. And the structural potential of the stone, utilizing arches, vaults, battle vaults of all kinds, curving them all around the ambulatory of the Colosseum, could be seen to great effect within the Colosseum. The building was so huge. It required a tremendous organization. So we think that it was built in quarters, and each quadrant was handed over to a different contractor, müteahhit. And this is speculated on the basis of the differing quality of workmanship. So we think that different, contractors, had a slightly different attitude, and then the work resulted in this final configuration. Structurally speaking, you see that there are great perforations in the ambulatory area, the seating area. Here's where the stands, would have been for the slaves, and then the seats would be arranged above the travertine and tufa piers. First, these radiating piers were built like the rays of the sun, from the center, radiating toward the outside, and then a battle vault would be thrown above it, as you see here, and then the battle vaults for each level were made in a slightly ascending order, so that you would have the tilting, which would provide the space for building seats, together with the steps and corridors that allowed the entrance into a particular section and the exit, from a particular section. So when 45,000 people, entered the building, there was no chaos. And when 45,000 people exited the, theater, there were enough corridors, there were enough, steps and stairs, and there were enough, exits, so that they could be, accommodated conveniently. In this arrangement, the engineering skill and their sensitivity to the viewing potential within the Colosseum was such that the inclination allowed perfect vision. So it was not too high, it was not too low. Wherever you were seated, around the Colosseum, you could see, what was going on within the central part of the building in the shows. So much stone was used here. 45,000 cubic meters was used just for the exterior part of the Colosseum, and maybe twice as much was used for the interior. So the lowest parts would be built of tufa. The travertine was used for the exterior, and then there was a brick and the mortar used for the higher parts of the radiating wings, and then they were closed together, as you see here, and above those were built the seats in this perfect pitch, so that you could have the viewing possibility in the center, and then you also had the circulation at different levels, and then of course this would be covered. Then you had standing room for the slaves, and then the masts above were for unfurling the awning to protect the spectators. A marvel of engineering and organization of labor. Different materials, huge amounts of it, and the organization of the work was quite stupendous. When buildings like the Colosseum are in their ruined state, we have a splendid information, because we see what is underneath, which would not have been possible to see had they not become ruins, or we would not be able to see it as clearly. So we have the seating area that we have been talking about. But the other marvel, which required a lot of expertise, was the ground on which the performances of the gladiators and the wild animals took place. We have mentioned the spectators being 45 to 50,000, but the number of animals that was slaughtered during these spectacles was no less. And we know that the Colosseum had a grand celebration in 248 AD, in the 3rd century, long after it was built, and some grand spectacles of animals took place at that time too. And when the excavators were excavating around the Colosseum, they at some point encountered the burial place for some of these animals, because if an elephant or a lion, is killed in the shows, it's a huge body, and when you have tremendous numbers of these, maybe 5,000, 3,000 animals being slaughtered, and when you bury these bloody carcasses, even after 2,000 years, these bodies piled one on top of each other would not be sufficient for decomposition. And the workers, the archaeological workers in the excavation, had to close off their noses. The stench and the smell from the decomposition was of such a magnitude that you couldn't stand there. After 2,000 years, the bodies could not become soil. I mean, they were still, decomposing. So I'm giving you this bloody detail in order to emphasize the great number of animals that were involved in the shows. In that respect, the ingenuity and the careful planning to allow the entrance, seating, entertainment, and exit of the thousands of different classes of people, was no less difficult for the scenario of the animals. I mean, just imagine the barracks and the animals that had to be brought in. These are fierce animals. You can't have them running about the city of Rome. You had to contain them somehow, and then you had to get them on the arena for the spectacle, and the same thing for the gladiators. So you needed barracks for the gladiators, you needed barracks for the animals. So this maze of corridors and cells, rooms that you see underneath the Colosseum gives us some clue about how carefully that planning had to be done also, bringing in these large numbers of animals. So underneath the floor of the arena, we have this maze of underground architecture for the animals and the people who were connected with the animals. You see these openings, several of them here. These were chambers, small chambers, connected to the floor above, where the spectacles were, and they were leading to windows or gates, you might say, that could open and release the animals into the arena. So once the animals were brought into the Colosseum and put into their respective chambers, they were starved in order to make them more fierce. I mean, hungry animals will attack their prey with greater ferocity. A very cruel game indeed, I mean, very, very bloody. And they would be starved in their cells, and then once the horizontal gate of the cell was opened, they would be led into a horizontal corridor which did not allow turning back. And once they entered the corridor and came to the end of the corridor, there was a system of elevators, and once they stepped on that, they were pushed above, and when they were pushed above, these the windows, or gates opened up, and they found themselves in the arena with thousands of people shouting, roaring. Suddenly they would be hit with sunlight. They have to adjust to that. They are moping around, and animals are coming from the various windows opened up all along the arena, and then they are made to fight each other, or the gladiators fight. So it's a great system to plan this whole arrangement as well. And here you see the cells better. And to protect the spectators who were seated in the front rows, there were huge iron screens, so that the animals would not, jump above to, create a danger for the spectators. In this respect, you have the danger schemes. You have large numbers of people. You have large numbers of animals, and you have a very, monumental architecture with a rather complex scenario that had different requirements. And the Roman architects and engineers, could create a design like the Colosseum to accommodate all these needs. The Colosseum was the last large stone edifice of its kind. Stone architecture continued to be built, but nothing to match the magnitude of the Colosseum. But by this time, the experiments of the Romans with the concrete with which they created an architectural revolution had reached a greater expertise. The Roman concrete had a constituency, the secret of which was pozzolana. Pozzolana is a volcanic ash coming from areas south of Rome, which you know were volcanic. And this volcanic ash, when mixed with aggregate, bits and pieces of brick, stone aggregate, and lime, and mixed with water, it created a very strong, almost indestructible material. And this property of Roman concrete was discovered when they were building harbor works, when they were building harbors and windbreaks in the port cities in Ostia and other places. This property was discovered, and then it was perfected initially in private architecture, because it was discovered very soon that the material had great potential for shaping more than stone. If you had a wooden centering, a wooden framework, then you could stabilize this material, and once it dried in the shape of the wooden centering, with the help of what we call relieving arches, then you had an indestructible material that you could use in the service of higher, wider, more curved and loader interiors, which the Romans were great masters at. But the problem of this, this new material, the Roman concrete, is not so much its weight, but it's the process of construction. While you are piling the material within the centering, the amount, if it exceeds a certain amount, then it will not dry. And if the wet concrete does not dry properly before the centering or the wooden framework is removed, then it will warp and it will become shapeless. In order to prevent this, the Romans used compartmentalized construction. They utilized the concrete in compartments. So they had a wooden, centering, a wooden framework. But within that wooden framework, they utilized relieving arches like these. These, arches were built within the thickness of the wall. So you would build in, compartments, different compartments, as you see here. The concrete would then, dry in smaller amounts, and then you continued. And in this way, once the concrete dried, you had this perfect, indestructible mass that was very resistant to time and weathering, and very easy to build. But this was such a novel idea that what had begun in the harbor works, which were invisible parts that nobody really cared about in terms of visual outlook, it found its experimental ground in villas and private architecture. When you look at this palatial complex in Rome on the Palatine, you see that the interiors have become very, very differentiated. Notably is the tyranny of the square and the rectangle overcome here. Not only do you have a simple curvilinearly defined space, but you have a space which is like a pumpkin, bulk about, lobes and segments of space, creating something unprecedented before. So you have alternating rectangles and hemicycles, and you have these domes which are in the form of lobes done in a curvilinear manner. But I draw your attention to the fact that this very creative configuration is relegated to the interior. It is not yet used on a large scale in the exterior because official public architecture had certain traditional restrictions. On the one hand, the new technology, the new material was used tremendously, but on the other hand, the visuality of that, the acceptability of that for the imperial image of the official architecture required that it should be less boldly used. So after the experimentation ground in the harbor works and the airports and the private architecture, gradually the pozzolana came to be used in a series of grand projects in more confident manners to result in the Pantheon. But already, as you know, before the Pantheon, there are great experiments of curvilinear spaces. I mean, you have already seen the Forum of Augustus, the hemicycles are here, but which were hidden by colonnades. So you had the Forum of Augustus focused on the temple, but once you entered the area of the Forum, you had no idea of the curvilinearity until you went beyond the colonnade and started walking here. A grander version of that in the Forum of Trajan, complete with the temple like the Forum of Augustus, complete with the hemicycles, is quite similar. The hemicycles are hidden. The hemicycles are used also for the basilica, the court building. But the Forum of Trajan, even though it's almost 100 years later than the Forum of Augustus, is still utilizing the post and lintel system for the official architecture, both in the inside of the basilica as well as the definition of the courtyards of the Forum. The experimentation and the full flowering of the pozzolana is relegated to the markets of Trajan, which was a new central distribution of resources coming in from various parts of the empire. It was like a state warehouse where the tax paid in the form of grains and liquids like oil would be brought into the markets of Trajan, a new function that had not been seen before. This was a state warehouse. For this new function, the new architecture could be implemented. So it is tremendously significant to compare and contrast the Forum with the markets of Trajan and the Forum of Trajan. In the markets of Trajan, when you look at it more closely, you don't see this kind of architecture where you have a frontal temple, as in the Forum of Transitorium, these engaged columns that we have seen. But instead, you take the hemicycle, which was hidden in the Forum of Augustus, and you use the hemicycle as the basis of the design. So the increasing boldness with each emperor as you head toward the second century AD, close to the third century AD, is the gradual progression and increasing confidence with the new material of concrete. So in the markets of Trajan, when you look at it, you have the complex scenario utilizing a hillside here, and within that you have these curvilinear components of the design, and they are utilizing concrete faced with brick. And the complex scenario of a central road, the Via Liberatica, the different warehouses, a facade here, built of brick and articulated again with engaged order, is rather interesting because that facade could not be seen. You have the hemicycle of the forum here. So since the hemicycle was quite high, it would have been difficult to see the bottom part from anywhere within the forum. I mean, you have the hemicycle and the wall of the forum here. So the only place where you observe it would be here. And yet here, you can't get back so much that you would be able to see that facade. So already, you see that the interiorization, the interior impact is increasingly becoming more important, which we shall see in the Pantheon later on in the class. But you see the huge vault forms, and this is one of the more publicly well-known instances where the architecture of Roman concrete is coming to the fore. And we have to think of this as a time of contrasts. Just as in the Hellenistic period, you had the scenographic planning of Pergamon on the one hand, and the rather didactic grid plan in Priene on the other hand. In the forum and markets of Trajan, you had the column as another ingredient, which we have already seen, that showed all these different components taking place within the large project of the forum of Trajan. Nothing like the column had been seen either, but this has nothing to do with concrete architecture. But the conception is novel. It is not a huge mausoleum, a grand, burial place for the emperor. It is a burial, it's a monument which is funerary because the ashes of the emperor are there. It is a triumphal monument, but it's not like a triumphal arch. Instead, the military campaigns of the emperor are wrapped around the, column with the statue of the emperor on the very top. But it has nothing to do with the concrete architecture. So on the one hand, you have the very traditional architecture of post and lintel system, utilized for the most important imperial project. Besides, you have the concrete architecture, also utilized as part of the similar imperial project. And then you have a column which is monumentalized like the arches, again utilized in a very novel kind of manner. And to remind you, which I couldn't show last time, you have all the details of the military campaign in a visual encyclopedia being conveyed to the people for posterity, showing both the defended and the defenders. And as I mentioned last time, you have the Roman soldiers marching on their horses, and they are displaying the decapitated heads of the so-called barbarians. So, while the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, made possible the connections and the distributions of goods throughout the empire, it should never be forgotten that there was a great, ruthlessness and a lack of tolerance. On one hand, if there were uprisings, they were crushed very severely. But on the other hand, if there were no uprisings, the Roman rule was so flexible as to allow individuality for the local components that created their own version of Romanization. So in this respect, the stature of Rome as the center where all these influences were dispensed became a focus and a model to be seen and interpreted by different provinces all around. But if you didn't have Suna, then this kind of architecture would not have been possible within the provinces, whether it be Gallia in France or whether it be Asia Minor, Turkey on the east. But we should also not underestimate the skill with stone architecture that was continued in the provinces, continuing the Hellenistic tradition in places like Anatolia. No pozzolana, but still a wide array of curvilinear spaces. But in Rome itself, in new typologies like the markets of Trajan, we find a new definition of space. On the one hand, you have the articulation around the Via Biberatica here in 2 stories, highlighting the exterior in a similar manner to the exterior of the Colosseum. But on the other hand, you have huge plain surfaces. And the limitation that had been inherent in the post and lintel system is now gone. As long as you could dry your concrete, as long as you could create a centering large enough and compartmentalized enough to allow this drying, you had a huge wall surface which you could perforate with huge openings in order to flood the interiors with light. You could curve your concrete to allow lateral light to come in, and as a result, the whole definition of interior space, the whole shaping of interior space, both materially as well as in the light quality, underwent a revolution due to this concrete architecture. And in the markets of Trajan, we see one of the more monumental instances, which is not private architecture, and which is not, a Bath, architecture in a small scale. So this is a rather significant building in that respect. And the siting of this complex scenario on a narrow plot of land, which was inclined, is also a challenge which the Pozzolana concrete architecture had to configure. So, on the one hand, you had the areas where all the paperwork was done. The auditors and the officials of the empire had to keep an accounting of all the supplies that came in, that would be distributed and stored in the state depots. And on the other hand, you had to allow for the chariots to come in and transport the goods. Here is a close-up view of the building I showed you. It's here. And when you look at this architecture, another thing which you could probably notice very, very clearly is that it is all fused together. No separate components lying about as we saw in the Greek architecture, but the concrete allowed even greater fusion of the different components belonging to the same complex. So here you have the concrete faced with brick, having huge niches, curvilinear and rectilinear, raised in 3 stories, a hemicycle built of concrete and allowing light. Huge amounts of light are coming in. And in this central hall here, we see a monumental interior which is both novel and experimental at the same time. In 3 stories, you have storage areas for the goods. These are 2-story buildings, rooms, but behind these, there's no allowance, no possibility for lighting at all. They are dark. But by raising the 3rd story above the groin walls, down with the centering of the Roman concrete, it was possible to perforate the upper part on both sides, and the light to come in obliquely from beyond the wall. So even though you have a blind exterior wall here, not allowing light, the light coming in from both sides beyond the first plane of wall in an oblique manner solves that problem. But the shapes of the walls that you see here are rather experimental, and in some of the later architecture they become more systematized. But needless to say, we see the new definition in a public space, which is official, that was made possible in a commercial building, but which is under the aegis of the state. This is not private architecture anymore. I haven't shown you any examples of private architecture, but in those, a great array of very creative interiors were designed. But it's significant that the markets of Trajan allowed this to occur in Rome, in the center, and in the public arena for all to see, without having the danger of offending public sensitivities and the requirements of the state image. The Roman bath buildings were the second arena where the potential of Pozzolana and also the planning schemes of the Romans reached the greatest fruition. And the Roman rule is a grand system, as we saw in the Colosseum. The shows were made possible by the transportation of hundreds of animals from Africa. Can you imagine the manpower that is necessary to catch these, to go on the hunt, to catch the animals, and then to put them into land vehicles, to transport them to the shore, to put them on the ships, and then from the ships to bring them to Rome, and then to bring them to the Colosseum? You need the centralized rule, the centralized authority, an organized army, an organized labor force, an organized sea route, an organized road network system. And the bath buildings benefited especially from this, together with other grand projects, because the precious marbles that came from all over the empire, from Asia Minor, from Proconnesus in the Marmara region, and then from Dokymaion near Eskişehir and Afyon, as well as Greece and all parts of the empire, were made possible because of the Roman marble trade, the organization of the Roman marble trade. So the hundreds of quarries, the stone quarries, taş ocakları, which were in all parts of the empire, had an organized labor force where the marble would be cut, the allocation of the work teams, the shops, the different stores which had their stamps for the marble, and then it was all brought to Rome. As a result, within the Roman projects in the city of Rome, especially the grand bath buildings of the early 3rd century, like the Baths of Caracalla, the Baths of Diocletian, you see these different colors of marble. When you have, porphyry, you have, giallo antico, you have, serpentine marble. With all these serpentino is this, I'm sorry, all these different marbles could be transported from the quarries in North Africa, the East, and the West. And without the imperial system, this would simply be impossible. And then it was all put into the use of the privileged citizens of the Roman Empire. The bath architecture was particularly suited for this. The walls would be covered with marble. There were flues in the walls. These are the pipes, the baked earth terracotta pipes, carrying vertical heat to heat the walls. And then there was a system also to heat underneath the floors, the hypocauste system. And of course, a tremendous amount of water, moisture, a tremendous requirement for drainage and disposal of the polluted, dirty water. So the scenario facing the Roman architect and engineering designing a Roman bath was no less complicated than those having to design a building like the Colosseum. In the Baths of Caracalla, it is thought that 3,000 people could bathe at the same time. So you have to have these large numbers of people, enter and exit. And in the ritual of the Roman, baths, the bathing, they had to navigate within the different areas of the Roman bath in a well-planned architecture, so that they would enjoy their undressing, their dressing, their hot, warm, and cold, bathing, the entire sequence, and also socialize and engage in the other, activities that we talked about. And while this people-oriented organization had to go on, the Roman architect also had to deal with how the water would be brought to Rome. So the aqueducts would transport the water in great amounts, and also they had to provide for the drainage. There was a big drain called the Cloaca Maxima. You don't need to remember this. And all that water had to be disposed. You had to heat the bath. So where would the wood come from? Well, you needed to cut the wood, bring it. And then you had to heat the bath. So once you heated it, it would stay heated for about a week, for example. And it was a tremendous organization. So all of this is a part of the imperial authority. for the service of the Roman people. Here is a further detail of the flues, F-L-U-E-S, creating the vertical heating, and the marble, which would cover the flues, the arches, the floors, when polychromatic, would become enhanced with the component of steam. There's a lot of steam and moisture in a Roman bath. And as you well know, moisture makes the color in the marble come out better. So what better material than shining, glossy, polychromatic marble covering all the surfaces and also having mosaics, for the floors, which would also become enhanced with the effect of moisture. So you have the choice of the right material, not only in a structural sense, but also in the sense of creating the space appropriate for the activity and enhancing the pleasure of the people who are engaged in that activity. And the pleasure derived also from the component of heat. Not only were the eyes entertained by the polychromatic marble, but the heat which was distributed from the vertical flues, and then the heat which was distributed from underneath in a hypocaustic system, gave you a nice cozy feeling. As you know from a Turkish bath, heat makes the pores in the body, open up, and then the dirt is scraped off, and you have a great, pleasure in a bodily, sensation. The mosaics, small bits and pieces of stone on the, floor, would enhance their effect, sometimes in geometric patterns, but very often with mythological scenes like this. So as you were plunging yourself in the warm and hot water, as you were walking about these surfaces, you felt that you were part of a great system, this is civilization, this is richness, this is comfort, and as a privileged Roman citizen, the state is providing this for you, and it is the power of the Roman system which makes this possible. So playing on the senses of the people in this respect is also quite important. A very different thing than the palestra of a Greek gymnasium. In the Greek gymnasium, the athletes for the polis had to be strong and healthy anatomically. So they would be engaged in the palestra, the courtyards connected with cold bathing, facilities, to engage in wrestling or other games. Here you see an instructor with his stick, pointing at the right angle of somersaulting or whatever. The strigil for scraping away the oils and the sweat to clear away the dead skin. The massaging component here, but this is more physical, for physical fitness. On the other hand, the Romans had some of that, but they also titillated the senses with these extensive marble surfaces, with mosaic floors, gleaming polished marble, the wading pools, abundant amounts of water. You can't have this with a shortage of water. You needed huge amounts of water, which again shows the richness of the empire. No restriction. The water is constantly flowing there. And these comfy Romans are wading about the pool. And as I mentioned last time, you don't need this monumentality for a Roman bath. but it's also part of that state system, whereby you are to be impressed mentally as well as bodily with every sensation to imprint the special privileges or belonging to the Roman state. And again, as I mentioned last time, it is the Roman bath where all of this comes into great tight organization. The components, the different components that we saw in the markets of Trajan, with markets, column, temple, basilica, hemicycle, were all variegated. They were organized, but not as tightly as the Roman bath. In the Roman bath, look at the different interior spaces, different kinds of walls. All are included in a great tight ensemble with mirror symmetry and axiality, focusing on the frigidarium and organizing the different caldarium, frigidarium, frigidarium, hot, tepid, and cold bathing sequences in organized patterns. Just imagine 3,000 people utilizing the bath for a whole, day, eating, drinking, washing, conversing, gossiping, engaging in, debates or some physical activities with known surfaces, and all of them within this, extravaganza. And this similar idea of the Roman Bath-Gymnasium component, the palestra, which the Greeks used for physical entertainment, and then the bath, which they used for the warm, bathing facilities, were joined in a Bath-Gymnasium complex. And we see some of the best examples of that in Asia Minor, in Turkey as well. In fact, the models in Turkey influenced the models in Rome to a certain extent. And at the Sardis in the western Turkey, you see the palestra, the Greek component, married to a Roman bath in a symmetrical fashion, the tight fashion of here there's a difference of a imperial court, a celebration, room where you have a showy, front for the bath. You have the cold bathing area, the pool, and then the hot areas, circulation areas. And in not just in Rome, but in Asia Minor and other provinces of the Roman Empire, you have these huge bathing complexes together with the palestra, the hot area, and the American archaeologists have restored the marble court for the Sardis in 2 stories, devoid of the marble. This would have been covered with marble, but articulated as a central focus for the bath. And the great variety: spiral columns, fluted columns, projections, and all this for a bath building. So it's not just the functional bathing, it's not just the water that comes through mountains and rivers, channeled in a controlled fashion in the bath, but it's the showy spectacle, it's also the appearance of that, conveying to the people what is possible in the Roman state. And all these experiments with give and take had differential influences to each other. Sometimes the provinces affected the center, and then sometimes the center affected the provinces. And I will leave at this example. This example here looks very much like a Greek temple, right? I mean, if I asked you what this temple is like, you would say it looks Greek. because it is not frontal. It has columns on all four sides. But then if you look more carefully, you would say it has to be Greek, but it can't be Greek because it has these hemicycles and these curvilinear spaces inside. And indeed, you would be right, because Greeks didn't have that. So, in Rome, in the time of Hadrian, we have a temple like this, which is also being built, which utilizes the highest technology and the new material in the curved spaces. And it is showing the concession to the Greek by having a peristyle temple surrounding it with a double story of colonnades all around. And then it becomes an architectural joke as well. Two hemicycles back to back. One is for Amor, the god of love. The other is for the personification of Rome. And Amor read backwards, R-O-M-A, is Roma. Roma read backwards, A-M-O-R, is Amor and Roma, and they're back to back. So it has room even for an architectural joke like that. So tomorrow we will continue from here. Thanks a lot.